I don't think anyone's explained this in a succinct way, and I know you're one of the few people who probably can. What is a staking pool? Like before we get into team and maxing and all this stuff, what is a staking pool? How do they work? And can you give us some examples, like compare and contrast a few different ones?
Yeah. So a staking pool simply is where rather than staking on your own, you join a group where you all put your hex into the pool, and then the stake is done all at once instead of everybody doing their own individual stake. And so staking pools have a lot of advantages versus staking on your own. One is that you earn more yield because of the bigger pays better bonus. Two, which is probably the most important one, and this was really the motivating factor of why I started building these trustless staking pools, is the gas savings. So for individual users, you save a ton of money on gas because rather than every user having to pay for gas on their own for ending the stake, which can be quite expensive, especially for the long stakes. You only have to only one gas fee is paid to end the whole entire stake, and then the redemption from the stake pool that you redeem your token for your ownership of it. That gas is cheap. It's very cheap compared to the gas for ending the stake. And so that's an important one for just the users, saves money. But in aggregate, as over thousands of users, that makes a really big impact on the amount of money that's able to be kept in the Hex economy, because all the money that everyone's paying for gas is money that they either have to sell Hex for ETH to pay for the gas, or they just hold the ETH separate and then never have bought the Hex in the first place. And so
Is that different with PulseChain though? Is that different?
So I mean, big if when it launches, but also if PulseChain, the fees will only be cheap at the start because one, there's going to be a fraction of the activity that there is on Ethereum. Two, it does increase the net capacity of the chain by because I think blocks go every 3 seconds instead of every 10 seconds, and I think the blocks are a little bit bigger. So we give up some.
Not only the gas fees, but like instead of using ETH, we're using Pulse to do transactions. So I know we're still giving Pulse away in that way, but doesn't that kind of feed into the buy and burn type of thing too?
So yeah, it does. So so for people that hold Pulse, that's fine. But also as the Pulse price goes up, the fees go up, and if PulseChain becomes a smashing success, the fees are going to be they're also going to creep up. So it's not like I think it's unwise to assume or have the expectation that someone's going to come and solve fees for you, because it's kind of like it's having high fees is a positive thing. That means that the blockchain is people view it as secure and permanent, and there's high demand for that block space. So you think about the blocks as the product that the blockchain sells you. They sell you the right to store information on it. And so if you want a successful blockchain that spans like retail and institutional use cases, and has onboards billions of people, then they're with finite block space, then the fees can absolutely go up. And so I'm preparing, especially for the longer term, I'm preparing for high fees on PulseChain. And even regardless, it's still a benefit to for the ETH side, because the whole reason that PulseChain is like the secret sauce behind PulseChain is in that like dual chain, like where both chains have where they like similar system state to start, and then they're working independently of each other forever, and then they're connected with that PulseX bridge. That's like the secret sauce behind PulseChain, is that like that these financial applications can operate across two chains where they're connected by a market. And so the ETH side is still going to always be important, because with like PulseChain on its own, yeah, it can be successful, but PulseChain working in tandem with Ethereum, that's like world-changing, major competitive advantage versus other layer ones, because none of the other layer ones necessarily work in tandem with Ethereum in that sense. And so
what does that open up? Can you expand on that just a little bit? Like, what does that open up? If that's something that's a game changer for PulseChain, like for people to just understand, like why is that so important versus all the other blockchains?
Because say for some use cases, perhaps they don't make sense to do on it, like for a smart contract to run entirely on Ethereum. So you could bridge over to PulseChain by means of a market, and then run some operation there, and then settle onto Ethereum, or vice versa. So having that, it's beneficial for spreading the load, where because Ethereum has its own set of benefits and PulseChain has its own set of benefits, and so for different use cases that have different requirements to be able to operate on do the like operations on the chain that suits their requirements, and then settle on the chain that they may be settling in. That's a big benefit. Also, it provides some resilience, where if you have your system where you treat it as a dual chain system from the start, then that makes you pretty resilient to different threats or different compromises or different issues that may arise, because because you can kind of span two independent chains, and kind of shift between the two. And so it's almost like because there's a copy of all the assets, at least the assets that exist when it launches, and so having that copy, because it's given equally to everyone, it's like as if it always existed, or as if it like is given to nobody. So it's it's like the system is now like kind of bifurcated in that way. And then and so having the dual chain kind of operation of a smart contract just makes it a little bit more resilient, where where things are settled in the market across the two, where that's how the market like expresses the risk across like between running your contract on Ethereum versus PulseChain. And so I think it just adds a little bit of resilience to these systems. It brings in speculative opportunity, and the more speculative opportunity there is, then the more liquidity there is, and that can really boost financial applications. So across the board, PulseChain on its own, is good, but a like dual chain PulseChain Ethereum, foundation for financial applications, like there's something really special in that. So that's why I think it's important to not just assume that PulseChain is going to solve some gas fee problem, because it's like, okay, if you think it's going to go up 10,000x and you think it's going to onboard all kinds of applications and use cases, then that's going to be expensive to use. And I know people talk about forking away from that forever, but it's like, okay, you're just going to fork away from your problem forever. And so like I'm not expecting low fees on PulseChain, and I'm especially not expecting low fees on Ethereum. So the gas savings is really important for keeping money in the hex economy, because it that's money that is otherwise going to other classes of users that aren't necessarily hexagons. Maybe on PulseChain, the validators who are earning those fees are likely to be hexagons, but maybe they won't be in due time. So gas saving is really critical, and that's why we're so I guess keep talking on the stake pool. So that's like to me the main benefit of stake pooling, and like why it's so important is that retention of value in the hex economy that's otherwise being bled out. And I'm not it's better to prepare for the worst and expect the worst than to have high expectations and hopium that like, oh, Richard will fix it. It's like, that's a lot of expectations. That's a lot of, what if something goes wrong? What if it doesn't work? Like, you should prepare for the worst, because what's the worst that, if you prepare for high gas fees and then the fees are low, then it's like, okay, who cares? We had the benefit of having, lower fees anyways, even if the fees in total are low, it's like the stake pooling participants are going to have less fee impact. And then, they earn more hex just from the bonuses. And then also you have the liquidity, since the stake pools, they issue a token that is backed by the underlying stake. They, you have instant liquidity if you ever need. So there's a lot of benefits to stake pooling. And to me, the most critical one, and that's why I started when EIP 2929 happened, and the cost of running the S-load, like of using the S-load opcode, which is used in that interest rate calculation, where every day that you're calculating interest, it runs that function, which costs, it's like, I think I'll have to look on hexnoob.com. It's like 1,200 units of gas. That suddenly became 3 times as expensive last year. So when that happened, it all clicked to me. And then when I figured out that a max length stake, or even the long stakes in general, like each additional day costs more gas, that's when it all clicked to me that it's kind of stupid that everyone is staking on their own when smaller stakers should be pooling, and to reduce the amount that they're paying, and then also to keep more money in the Hex economy. But then there's also the liquidity benefit of the pools, is that you can sell, transfer the token that's backed by is fully fungible, fully transferable, and then that seems to be a really, really important use case for people. That was more of like a side effect. Like the main reason I built this was for the gas savings, but that liquidity aspect of it, that seems to be something that's really, really popular amongst users.
Well, so what are the disadvantages though? Like, what are some of the trade-offs you make when in doing stake pools versus just buying and staking Hex?
So you introduce, it's just another layer to the stake, but it's that risk is kind of counteracted, one through just the audits, two by these contracts are so simple. Like in introduction, you're kind of describing the complexity. These are actually very, very simple, in how they work, and it's it's just barely adding any like interface to it, and the contracts are so simple, and they're audited, but they're so simple that a user can reasonably read them, and make sense of it. And I support that with making videos where I go through line by line, and I really make sure to provide as many resources as possible so people can personally understand what's going on. Because if because it introduces that little bit of contract risk, if you want to call it that, it's important for people to understand it, and then for them to be able to measure that risk for themselves. And so so that's kind of how you counteract that, and that's pretty much what I consider the only but it's really not much different than if you're staking through MetaMask. It's like, are you reading the software underlying your MetaMask that's connecting to the Hex contract and signing the transaction? Like probably not. And so it's kind of an additional layer on top of that. So that's really the main drawback from that. But other than that, I think the benefits, especially for the smaller users, massively outweigh that one piece of risk.